Operating Procedures Part 2, Key Topic 9. All right, we already saw this regulation, prevention of interference. The station operator must determine that the frequency is not in use by monitoring the frequency before transmitting, except for the transmission of signals of distress. What should a station operator do before making a call or a transmission? I'm sorry, I didn't read it exactly correct, but it's close enough. It's partially on screen. So what should you do before making a transmission, before hitting the transmit button? Normally you're listening hands-free, and in order to transmit, you actually have to press the button. In aircraft, we call it the PTT switch. It's on the back of the yoke, a little red button you press, or the pilot presses, and that's the PTT, push to talk, which you're going to get a pilot squawk, basically, in maintenance world. That's where they'll write up at the end of the flight all the little idiosyncrasies that the plane had that they want maintenance to take a look at. And the PTT switch is a frequent entry on the squawk list. All right, so basically I see at least one person's already answered. So what are the options? A, except for the transmission of distress calls, determine that the frequency is not in use by monitoring the frequency before transmitting. Yeah, that sounds like almost exactly what the regulation said. Or B, transmit a general notification that the operator wishes to utilize the channel. So you just press the button and you talk to everybody. Hey, this is Mike. I want to use your channel. No, that's not the first thing you do. C, check the transmitting equipment to be certain it is properly calibrated. Before you actually talk, you have to calibrate the equipment. Or D, ask if the frequency is in use. Is anybody here? You can just listen. You'll hear that they're there. If they're normal conversations, there may be a break in their conversation, so give them a few seconds to continue on. But if there's going to be a long silent period, you can break in and ask if this channel is clear. So what was our best one? A, except for the transmission of distress calls, determine the frequency is not in use by monitoring the frequency. All right, that's basically a repeat of what we already did. A few more. 116, you can see we're covering it quite a bit. You're on a ship, and basically these are the regulations that you're subject to. I saw this on the last presentation. C, changing to a working frequency after establishing communication with another station on one of the two emergency channels. The people to the conversation must change to an authorized working frequency for the transmission of messages. And D, limitations on calling. Calling a particular station must not continue for more than 30 seconds in each instance. If the called station does not reply, station must not again be called until after 2 minutes. And after, and I think there's even a longer one. If you do that like 2 or 3 times, then you have to wait like 5 minutes. Unless nobody's using the channel, then you can switch back to the 2. All right, So let's relaunch this poll before I get into it. Using an SSB, that's a single sideband, and I think at this point, depending on how you've been reading the chapters, but we've talked about, the book has talked about the single sideband, which is what is currently the common use, especially in aeronautical. So they're looking at the two emergency channels, 2182 Kila or channel 16 Mega. So what are the options here? A, preliminary call must not exceed 30 seconds. There was a 30-second requirement for asking for the person, so that's not a bad answer. B, if contact is not made, you must wait at least 2 minutes before repeating the call. That also looks good. Oh, okay, D is going to be all the above, so far I'm going to like that one. Or C, once contact is established, you must switch to a working frequency. So yes, D, all the above. The idea is to take up as little time on the distress or calling frequency as possible. Keep in mind that some vessel in distress may need the frequency at any time. Still at subsection 116, A, calling coast stations. If you're on the ship and you're using frequency 2182 kilohertz for calling the coast station and for replying to calls from coast stations, it's authorized. However, such calls and replies should be on the appropriate shore ship working frequency. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If you're using the emergency channel, how does the second sentence of it must be on the ship shore working frequency? I'm not sure. We'll take that for what it's worth. F, transmission limitations on the two emergency channels. To facilitate the reception of distress calls, all transmissions on 2182 or 156.8, that's Kila and the Mega, respectively, must be minimized, and transmissions on 156.8 Mega must not exceed 1 minute, which I guess for 2182 Kila there is not an equivalent 1 minute limitation. I think it's just a rewording of what we've already seen. So let's take a look at the question. On what frequency should a ship station normally call a coast station when using a radio telephone emission? So you want to call the coast station. What channel or what frequency do you use? Is it A, on a vacant radio channel determined by the licensed radio officer? Not a terrible answer, but not. I can tell already it's not going to be the best. B, calls should be initiated on the appropriate ship-to-shore working frequency of the coast station. All right, that's probably why the section was poorly worded, because it did say that. No. Initiate the call on the ship-to-shore working frequency. I don't even know why they mentioned 2182. C, on any calling frequency internationally approved for use within an international telecommunications union, Region 2, which we certainly haven't memorized what regions. At a certain point, we may look at those a little closer. Or D, on the two emergency channels at any time. So when do you normally call a coast station? And yeah, I like B is the best. It should be on the appropriate ship-to-shore working frequency of the coast station. You already know what the coast station's working frequency is, and you're going to be listening to it. Now, it might be one of these two channels. It's doubtful, though. So B, yes, B is correct. All right, so I guess there's some special licenses that are granted to land-based stations from the FCC, and they do assign specific channels to such stations. And I'm sure you have a book on board which will list their stations. It looks like a little bit of a review because the prevention of interference, we have looked at that before. Except in the cases of distress, communications between ship stations or between ship and aircraft stations must not interfere with public coast stations. So if there's a public coast station, basically you're not to interfere with them. Basically cutting in. You might be able to talk to them when it's not being otherwise used, but you must not interfere. And then I threw in the priority of distress transmissions. The distress call has absolute priority over all other transmissions. All stations which hear it must immediately cease any transmission capable of interfering with the distress traffic, the radio messages, and must continue to listen on the frequency used for the emission of the distress call. I think it goes on further to say that if you do hear a distress call, wait until the call is done before you reply to it, because you might not be the assisting ship, and telling them 100 miles away that you can hear them isn't going to help them much, and you might actually cut off their message so that a ship that is much closer may not hear the full message. So wait until the message is done, and if you do hear any type of distress traffic, stop any conversation that you're in the middle of and listen. And even the first one does say, except in case of distress, communications between the ship or between ship and aircraft must not interfere with the coast. All right, and here's the question. Under what circumstances may a ship or an aircraft station interfere with a public coast station? Almost verbatim what we were just talking about. The options are A, in cases of distress. That's when you can interfere. Or B, under no circumstances during ongoing radio communication. They're talking, you can't use them. Even to say that your ship's on fire. No, that's not going to be right. C, during periods of government priority traffic handling. And that might be an example of when you should leave them alone anyway, but that's not necessarily applying to the distress situation. Or D, when it is necessary to transmit a message concerning the safety of navigation or important meteorological warnings. Oh, you want to basically interfere with the coast station saying, oh, excuse me, but there's a storm a brewing, or there's a log in the water. No, they don't want you to cut in for things like that. Ship in distress, no problem. You can interrupt. And only then it is legal to do so. All their messages must be sent in such a manner as to not disrupt other stations. All Priority of distress transmissions. Didn't I already look at that? Oh, I didn't take, I didn't want to say that twice. My bad. I got to go back and correct that a little bit. Basically, I already went over this. I was going to delete it from the prior slide. All right. Radio, telephone, station identification. We haven't talked about this one yet. This section applies to all stations using telephony which are subject to this part. With some exceptions, stations must give the call sign in English. Identification must be made at the beginning and end of each communication with other stations. 2. At 15-minute intervals when transmission is sustained for more than 15 minutes. When public correspondence is being exchanged with the ship or aircraft station, the identification may be deferred until the completion of the communications. So if you're already talking to an aircraft or a ship, you don't have to stop every 15 minutes to, this is WKAR on your FM radio dial. You can hear that on the regular broadcast stations. B. Private coast stations located at drawbridges and transmitting on the navigational frequency of 156.650, so that might be their navigation frequency. Yeah, that must be the ship-to-ship also. They may identify by using the name of the bridge in lieu of the call sign. Ordinarily, how would a station using telephony emission identify? Now, let's see. Relaunches poll. Put it off to the side a little bit. Move it down. All right, ordinarily. A, at least every 10 minutes. B, at the beginning and end of each transmission and at 15-minute intervals. C, at 15-minute intervals unless public correspondence is in progress. Or D, at 20-minute intervals. Okay, I think we just read that, so we do know that it's at the beginning and the end of each transmission and at 15-minute intervals. So B. That not only lets listeners know who is communicating, but it also satisfies the FCC's rule that only licensed operators are allowed to use the airwaves. You must give your station call signs in English, the phonetic alphabet. You've probably already been exposed to this. Here's a quick rundown of it. Some of these words you're probably familiar with. Other ones you're probably not at all. Whiskey Tango, Foxtrot. Sounds like a movie. You might have also heard Alpha Bravo, Charlie. Well, it goes Alpha Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo, Foxtrot, Golf, Hotel, India. I always miss that one. Juliet, Kilo, Lima. Yes. In Ohio, it's Lima. Mike, November, Oscar, Papa, Quebec, Romeo, Sierra, Tangle, Uniform, Victor, Whiskey, X-Ray, Yankee, Zulu. And if the planes are usually referred to that. I know the last place our planes were started with TA, so they're always Tango Alpha. Were they? TO. Tango Oscar. No, I don't. It's been a while now. All right, let's see what the question is. The International Phonetic Alphabet, the letters E, M, and S are represented by what words? A, Echo, Michigan, Sonar, which, being from Michigan, I know that that is not correct. M is actually Mike, which is correct under B and C. B, Equator Mike sonar. Well, Mike's right. A, Echo is right. How about C, Echo Mike Sierra? Can't find anything wrong with those. Or D, Element, Mr. and Scooter. None of the three. So it's going to be clearly C. And that's a nice little thing to maybe fill out the alphabet on the side of a piece of paper and see how many you can write in from memory, and go look up the ones that you missed. Like Q. What's Q? Anybody? No? Quebec. That's one I always miss. And India. Oh, here we go. Yeah, Quebec. All right, I think that wraps it up. It sure does. All right. Pleasure having you again.